Are you in an enmeshed relationship? Are you enmeshed or is your partner enmeshed? I'm going to give you 7 signs of an enmeshed relationship. But before I get there, I want to briefly talk about what enmeshment is and what it isn't, and also ask you about what stage you're in your relationship. There's sort of a period in romantic relationships where it's pretty common to be enmeshed. But before we go there, what is enmeshment? So, enmeshment is where boundaries aren't clear, they're enmeshed, entangled, and roles and responsibilities are kind of confused and mixed up. And to really summarize it, people can't really be who they really are in an enmeshed relationship. So, enmeshment does not equal dependence, and I just put out a video on that, so I will link it at the end of this one. Definitely worth watching to understand that concept. And the opposite of enmeshment is really about individuation, is really about being able to be fully who you are while also being in healthy, intimate relationships, interdependent with people, connected, but also autonomous. So let's talk first about that early stage of falling in love, particularly if you're a teenager or a young adult. Like, it can be so intense, that feeling of falling in love. All your internal chemical responses are just going wild. You might feel like you are just that soulmate period, that period of like, wow, we're soulmates, we're so much alike. Everything he does, I love, and he loves everything I do, and he makes me feel great about myself, and I make him feel great about himself without even doing anything. And we can just stare at each other for hours. And we want the same things. It's not just that, like, I'm not doing this because he wants to, but it's just we want to be together all the time. We want to do the same things. And yeah, we feel like we're one person. So I can actually remember feeling that way. It's great, but it doesn't last, right? So that period of a relationship where you really truly fall in love, particularly for the first time, and particularly at those younger ages, yeah, that period of the relationship, you're enmeshed, right? But it isn't, I don't know, it isn't abnormal. It isn't necessarily a problem. And it can help to initially like form a really intense bond that, if each person can navigate the space moving forward of beginning to take care of their own needs and beginning to be autonomous again, strengthening their own individuation, right? Because particularly at those ages, teenager and early 20s, right? The stage in life is about individuation. It's about finding out who you are, who you want to be, what you want to do, what your values are, how you want to act, all of that. It's about individuation. So that's a necessary stage, really, for a very healthy life. It's also a necessary stage for healthy intimacy, because to be intimate and healthy with somebody, we have to be willing to be fully who we are. So none of that really matters in those first, it could be a few months. I've heard that that stage can last between, say, 3 months and 18 months. I don't think it ever lasts longer than that 18 months, because what happens is that as each individual begins to realize, like, oh, wow, I do have to start paying attention to my friends. I do have to start paying attention to my schoolwork more. Maybe if I'm in high school, I do want to choose a college I've always wanted to attend that's across the country, and you're not going to be going there, right? So all of these sort of tensions come up because you're not the same person. So successful relationships can kind of navigate that space as each person begins to assert their own needs again. And a balance can be reached between the compromises that are required in a relationship and each individual's hopes, dreams, desires, wants, needs, right? And that's where true love starts to form, because true love is about really caring and wanting the other person to be happy while you're also taking care of yourself. So I'm using this as an example because that very first initial stage of a romantic relationship, many, if not all, people who fall in love in that way will be enmeshed. And then the challenge is continuing the relationship as you move out of that, which you'll have to do. So as that initial infatuation kind of ebbs a bit and the relationship matures, the couple has to find that balance of closeness along with independence. And if they can, and if they can support each other's individuation, beautiful thing. But if you're watching this video, my guess is that your relationship, well, it could be one of two things. And tell me, I always like to know exactly why you're watching it because then I know what to talk about, right? I want my videos to be addressing what's on your mind. But I imagine you might be in a relationship which has passed that initial infatuation stage, and yet maybe one partner doesn't really want to let go, or you really can't figure out that balance. So maybe you're arguing all the time. Maybe you're arguing about closeness, how much time together, having independence, all of those kind of issues. Or the other reason I could think maybe you'd be watching this would be if you have friends who are basically telling you you're enmeshed and you're spending too much time with your romantic partner. So let's go through some signs that you are in an enmeshed relationship beyond that initial infatuation stage. Okay, sign number one. There is pressure to agree. It could be pressure to agree on what activities are fun. It could be pressure to agree on major political issues. If you are feeling pressured to agree, there's a likelihood that your partner is enmeshed, probably from an enmeshed family system themselves. And if you're giving into that pressure, you are probably enmeshed, right? So both people, when one person is pressuring the other to agree and the other one feels like they always have to agree, both people are enmeshed. Hope that makes sense. Now, I do want to differentiate here because when we have a romantic partner or even a best friend, right, and we are having a struggle with somebody or like a conflict at work, we want support. We want the other person to understand our point of view and to side with us, right? Like that's normal. But if it's pressure to agree on all sorts of things, right? That's a problem. Now, I also want to say in that like first falling in love stage, right? People very often will agree to do activities that maybe they never wanted to do before, or they might say that they've done something just because they want to impress the other partner, right? Like that would be like really, really early dating stage. But I know that I've dated people and they've been like, oh, yeah, I love skiing. I love skiing. And you ski together. They seem to be having fun. And then a little ways into the relationship, you find out, no, they really hate it. But they said that because they wanted to be close to you, right? So if you are finding that you are kind of lying about who you are in the relationship, even if it's in subtle ways, like whether you like to ski or whether you like rock music or opera, right? If you're lying about that kind of thing, you sort of have to ask yourself, why am I not comfortable being who I am? So that pressure to agree could be pressure from the other partner, or it could be your own internal sense that you better agree. Both reflect enmeshment. Sign number two. Let's say you have a partner who is always worried about you. They worry about where you are. They worry if you are traveling somewhere. They are worried all the time. Well, the person probably has anxiety, but there's also some enmeshment going on there. I've seen in a couple of other videos that people will say that the sign of somebody who's enmeshed is that they're always mad. And I would be like, sometimes, but no, I don't think it's always mad. But I'd say probably always worried in one way or another. But let's say you're in a relationship with somebody who worries about lots of things. Let's say they worry about your temper because you have a temper, and they're worried you're going to do something at work where you blow up, okay, and lose your job. And so you do something at work and you blow up and you lose your job. And then you don't tell them. You're not telling them because you're worried about their worry. All right. This is how you can begin to understand that enmeshment is rarely just in one direction. Sign number three of an enmeshed relationship is a lot of should language. You should be this way. You should be that way. And you might even be doing it to yourself, right? You might be like, oh, I shouldn't do XYZ because it will upset my partner. I should do this, right? A lot of should language reflects enmeshment. Sign number four, blame, particularly blaming your emotions on somebody else. Now, let me say, this is normal in the US anyway, in terms of our language. We use this language that says, "You made me mad." Well, that's enmeshed language. So I'm not saying that that always means that you're enmeshed, but if you become aware that this language is enmeshed, you can see if you can challenge your thinking on it. So let's say you say to somebody, you said you'd call me at like 5 and you didn't, and I texted you twice and you didn't respond, and yeah, I'm upset, right? You are basically saying that this behavior, your response to this behavior, your emotional response to this behavior was to get upset, to get angry. That's different than saying, "You made me angry." I imagine explaining that would take a lot more time. If you want me to do something explaining that in another video, let me know in the comments. But we are responsible for our own emotions. That does not mean that other people's behavior does not cause a particular way that we tend to respond to those situations. But there might be some people who are totally clueless about time and they wouldn't even notice if their partner said they were going to call at 5. They may not even notice, right? Or if they were super busy or whatever, they got distracted, maybe they wouldn't get mad. So it's not the actual behavior, it's the emotional response. And I also just want to say here, that would be a normal emotional response if somebody says they'll call and they don't call, particularly if it's a pattern, right? But the language of enmeshment is that you're responsible for making me this mad. You're responsible for putting me in a bad mood. You make me depressed. You make me angry. So that kind of language and thinking generally indicates enmeshment. Sign number 5 of an enmeshed relationship are very rigid roles. So in general, if we can really be who we are, right? If we can really individuate, we have flexibility around our boundaries. We have flexibility around what role we play in different situations. When people grow up in an enmeshed family system, one of the characteristic, I think one of the characteristics of an enmeshed family system is that people develop into very rigid roles, right? So I have a couple of videos on like the hero child, the scapegoat, the mascot, right? These are all different roles. And if you're in a role, you are presenting a particular side of yourself. You're presenting a persona. If you're presenting a persona, you're not being who you fully are, right? You either haven't integrated yourself, you haven't integrated with the parts of yourself that you've rejected, or you feel ashamed of those parts and you hide them, or you feel some fear in showing them, right? So, what would be an example of this? You might have a couple where she's the emotional one and he takes care of everything. Well, if he has to take care of everything, what happens when he gets sick or when he gets whiny, right? There needs to be flexibility around different situations to really have a very healthy relationship. Another example could be one partner is very hot-headed and the other one just kowtows and compromises and is always trying to soothe the situation, right? So very rigid patterns of behavior reflect enmeshment and probably mirror the family dynamics of each of them growing up. Sign number 6, and actually 6 and 7 really sort of encompass all of the rest of them. But sign number 6 would be a lack of autonomy, the individuation. So doing everything together or wanting to do everything together all the time does not make sense once the relationship has moved into that more mature stage. A feeling that you can't live without the other person, you can't function, or a feeling that your partner can't bear to be without you. And as I say this, I also just want to caution, like, this isn't about normal sadness when a couple is separated, right? Or one person being a little bit worried if the other is traveling or feeling less safe, right? A woman who is living in a home and when the partner leaves, she feels a little bit uneasy. That is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about really an extreme feeling that you have to be together. You can't function on your own. And then sign number 7 is emotional fusion. Now, this is really the core of enmeshment. Emotional fusion is you don't know whose emotions you're feeling. Or it could be your partner seems to be feeling all of your emotions or is very upset if you're feeling a particular emotion. They really don't want you feeling that emotion. So they're trying to like control your emotions, like, don't be so anxious, don't be so upset, right? We get to validate our own emotions. In a healthy relationship, our partner can validate our emotion. Doesn't mean that they want to put up with it all the time, because if you're somebody who gets anxious like all the time, that might get hard for your partner, right? But they can acknowledge it, validate it, and then set a healthy boundary for themselves in terms of how to deal with it without trying to get you to change it. If I'm trying to get you to change your emotion, there's something about your emotion that's bringing up an emotion in me that I don't want. And I'm not willing to take care of my emotion. I want you to take care of yours. All right. Again, I hope that makes sense. But I do talk about that more in some of my other videos. And basically, the opposite of enmeshment, right, other than individuation, would be having healthy boundaries. And I'd really encourage you to take this boundary quiz that I have. It is one that will help you identify, based on your boundary personality style, what your positive cognition is about yourself. And that positive cognition reflects a negative cognition. And that's really what drives a lot of the enmeshment issues that persist into later life. And it drives some of the difficulties around boundaries. I think it'll be really helpful for you. I think you'll find it interesting. And let me know if you like this video. Give it a like if you did, and subscribe to my channel for more. And I will see you next week.